Well, it's the last day of February 2026, and I haven't done a talking video in a while, but today I wanted to talk about something that I read this morning, and I just wanted to share it with everyone. I think it's very wise and offers perspective that may even give you some comfort. I've been reading Scott Kelly's book. Scott Kelly is the twin brother of Senator Mark Kelly. And Mark Kelly has been in the news lately because he and 5 other Congress members, made a video for people in the military, encouraging them to remember that they took an oath to not follow unlawful orders. And of course, there's been blowback, and Pete Hegseth has gone after Mark Kelly. I don't really want to talk about Mark Kelly except for the fact that he is Scott Kelly's brother. And I have been reading Scott Kelly's book, which is titled Endurance: A Year in Space, A Lifetime of Discovery. He published it in 2017. I think it was in October. I purchased it in November 2017. It's been sitting in my collection ever since then, and I just now am reading it, even though I've owned it since 2017. This is a habit that I have a lot of times. If I see something that looks interesting, I will often purchase it. You know, like books or music or a movie or something. I'll purchase it and promise that I'll look at it later. And sometimes it takes me a long time to get around to it. I have books that I read immediately as soon as I get them, and then I have some that I don't get to for 9 years. But I actually think now is a good time to be reading Scott Kelly's book because there's a lot of wisdom in it. And I've been working on it now for several weeks. I used to be able to blow through books really fast because I was an English major in college, and so I had to read books constantly. But as I've gotten older, I have a tendency to fall asleep when I try to read. And my eyes are not as good as they used to be. So I've been slowly getting through this book, and it actually is a very interesting, entertaining, fascinating book. Very well written, but also there's a lot of wisdom in it. And this morning I was reading chapter 15, and this is when he's taking his very first spacewalk. He'd been on other missions to the space station and on the space shuttle before they retired that program. And he'd never had a chance to do a spacewalk because he was always the one who was piloting or commanding. But on this mission, he was allowed, or based on how he explained the preparation and the actual work involved with a spacewalk, it was challenging for him. But yet it was very profound, and this is a passage that I saved that I'd like to share. I think it applies a lot to life, especially our lives right now. He says, "On Earth we look at everything through the filter of the atmosphere, which dulls the light. But here in the emptiness of space, the sun's light is white-hot and brilliant. The bright sunshine bouncing off the Earth is overwhelming. I've just gone from grunting in annoyance at a piece of machinery to staring in awe at the most beautiful view I've ever seen." And when I read that, I realized that it really applies a lot to all of us, because we're down here on Earth, and the view that we have is filtered through the atmosphere. Or if you really wanted to take this in a different way, if you're sitting at home on Facebook or YouTube or watching Fox News or CNN or oh God, any number of things that you could be doing in today's hyper world where you get fixated on things that ultimately really don't matter and that are kind of a skewed perspective you forget that there's another perspective that you're not seeing. And I think of Scott Kelly floating around in space, looking at Earth and how beautiful the Earth is from space. This is a view that most people will never, ever have the chance to see for themselves. And there he is, outside the space station, which travels at 17,500 miles per hour. He's experiencing the sun rising and setting every 90 minutes. He's experiencing the temperature going from 200 degrees Fahrenheit to way below zero. Something that he can tell us happens. But for us on Earth, we just can't really fathom it because we have never experienced it. It was kind of profound and mind-blowing for me to read this. And it reminded me of all the stupid things that we get fixated on. Things like pointless arguments with strangers on social media, reacting to every threat and stupid thing that Donald Trump says. Which isn't to say you can't take him seriously, because you have to. But at the same time, understand that he can't control everything, and he's not particularly special. One thing that I remember from a fellow YouTuber who unfortunately passed away last year, I've mentioned him before, the Telltale Tarot. Unfortunately, I think that his videos are no longer available. But I did used to watch him last year, and he often said things that I thought were wise. He offered me a lot of comfort as our political landscape changed again. And he said, every day, in spite of all of what's going on, the sun rises, the birds sing, the sun sets, the earth spins. These are all things that nobody can control. Nobody. And eventually, everybody has their time in the sun in some way. Things end, things begin. This will end, and it may be better or it may be worse, but it will be over at some point. So I just keep that in mind and realize that what we're seeing right now is just one view. It's one perspective. And there's a big picture that most of us can't see. And it may not become clear until later. Just like as I was reading this book, or I've been reading this book and I've had it for 9 years. Now is the time to read the book. Even though I've had it since 2017. Because now it's giving me the information I need. Maybe that makes sense to some of you. Maybe it doesn't. That's about all I needed to say, but I am hoping maybe later today, if my voice holds out, I might do a song, because the great Neil Sedaka has passed away. And as a child of the 70s and 80s, of course, I remember him. But also, more recently, during the pandemic, he used to make videos on his YouTube channel. And I found him very comforting. Here's this man in his 80s. Everybody's locked down. We're all depressed. We're all wondering if this is going to be life from now on. Of course it wasn't. And I knew it wouldn't be, but you just don't know how long this is going to go on, and it's depressing. And here he is in his 80s, and he's playing his piano and singing, and he's very upbeat, telling us the story of how he wrote these songs. And giving us something to focus on besides sickness and death and awful things. And I just think it's important to remember that this is just a time. Probably was meant to happen, and it will be over soon, or at some point. Maybe not soon enough. Maybe not in my lifetime. But when you consider the history of the world, it's a blip. And when you consider all of the developed nations in the world, it probably was our turn, wasn't it? In the United States, we all all of the big, most powerful nations, and probably every nation really, has had at least one leader like this on some level. And I'm now living in a country where that is made clear every single day. So, that's my message to you today. I'm going to sign off now. I guess one last thing I want to share is a picture that came up in my memories. A treat for you, for those of you who made it to the end of the video. Me and my husband Bill, 9 months after we got married. I did all right, didn't I?